Hello there. Today I'm tasting a wine that's literally only just been released, and this is a wine from Tenuta San Guido, and this is their 2022 Sassicaia. So Sassicaia is the most searched for Italian wine on the Wine Searcher website, and the wine is a Cabernet based wine. It's a blend of predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon with a little Cabernet Franc in it, and the estate is located in the Maremma region near the village of Bolgheri in Tuscany. The estate is approximately 2,500 hectares in size, of which they've got 115 hectares of vineyard, but alongside that they also cultivate olives. There's a racing stable on the estate. They have 1,500 hectares of forest. There's an 80 hectare wildlife reserve for migratory birds, that's down by the coast, and then they have other agricultural crops as well that they grow. So the estate runs up into the hills from the sea. They actually have an area of beach next to the wetlands reserve. It runs through on the flat where the horses are trained, up into the hills where there are vineyards at sort of altitudes between 100 and 400 metres above sea level. And both the altitude and the proximity to the sea serve to moderate the warm climate here. Now, the planting of vines on the estate was pioneered by the Marchese Incisa della Rocchetta back in the 1940s. And this started out almost as if it was a hobby, with the idea that the family would drink the wine. It was more his interest than the idea of it being particularly commercial at first. However, in 1971, the wines were first commercialised with the launch of the 1968 vintage. Soils in the vineyards are varied, but they're predominantly calcareous, with both marlstone and pebbles, or sassy as they're known, hence the name Sassicaia, translating to field of stones, field of pebbles. And then there are other areas that are rich in clay. 2022 was a warm and really quite concentrated vintage. The autumn started off cooler than average and there was heavy rainfall. There was an intense cold snap in November, and that was really good for ensuring the dormancy of the vines and for killing any pests in the vineyard. Throughout the rest of the winter, sufficient rain fell to recharge the soil's water reserves. A cold spell in spring killed some of the early buds, and that served to reduce yields for the year. As a result of this, the fruit tended to ripen well and to have good colour in 2022. There was a dry summer and there was intense heat, but the soils had good water reserves, and the location of the vineyards on the hills was sufficient to prevent stress to the vines. There was some quite heavy rain in August, which broke the hot spell, and from then on, ripening continued in almost ideal conditions, allowing the fruit to be harvested with good maturity. Now, for the lower lying vineyards, harvest started in early September, and then the higher altitude vineyards were harvested at the end of September. In general, it was quite a challenging vintage, but yields were quite low and the fruit was of excellent quality. The fruit was picked by hand, was sorted carefully, and fermentation went on in temperature controlled stainless steel tanks, and that was completed by the end of October. The regime for maceration was relatively moderate, lasting for between 13 and 18 days depending on the lot. This was followed by gentle pressing, and was allowed to undergo a spontaneous malolactic conversion before it was put into barrel. At the end of November, the wine was put into French oak barriques. These were a mixture of new, second and third fill oak, with 40% of the oak being new, 40% being second fill, and the balance being third fill. And these were 225 litre barriques. The wine aged in barrel for 23 months, and the different lots of wine were kept separate up until this point, so each lot would end up in a single set of barrels. So at this stage the lots were returned to tank and then blending took place, and the wine will have spent at least 3 months in bottle prior to release. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Looking at it, it's a medium to dark, relatively vibrant ruby red. It's certainly not opaque. I can see through it fairly easily. The label says this has 13.5% alcohol, and swirling it, it's actually forming some quite generous tears there. There seems to be a certain sort of viscosity there. There is a lovely vibrancy to the colour. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are complex and beautifully defined. There's a wonderfully integrated oak note. Cedary oak runs through this, but it doesn't particularly stand out. The fruit has some relatively high-toned red fruit perfume. It's got a sort of a balsamic note as well. So you've got notes of mulberries, perhaps hints of raspberries, maybe ripe red plum, and also a sort of a blood orange note as well that's very attractive. Perhaps also just layered over that hints of myrtle, maybe a touch of sage, some sort of wild vegetal note there. But the oak also expresses itself alongside these sort of balsamic, almost sort of slightly heading towards a mushroom note. There's an umami note as well, and then beyond that is where you see the oak, where there's a sort of almost a white pepper spice, touches of sweet spice, and a slightly drying, perhaps slightly earthy touch right at the very finish there. There's a lovely intensity, purity, and a really good definition to these aromas. So let's have a taste, shall we? In contrast to the open perfumes of the nose, the palate is very structured, medium, perhaps medium to full-bodied, very fine-grained tannins. There's a lovely warmth coming through. I mean, the alcohol is only 13.5%, but there's a warmth and a ripeness. There's almost a note of a sort of cooked, dark, very ripe plum. And there are spices behind it. I mean, again, I think it's the oak, but it's not showing as obvious oak. There's a hint of nutmeg, but there's also a dustiness. There's a white pepper note. The tannins are very fine, and there's a lovely concentration. Also, all this is supported by lovely acidity that's interplaying with the tannins to give a mouth-watering nature to the grip here. Fruit has good ripeness and good density on the mid-palate, and at that stage doesn't seem too closed. But then you sort of start to get more sort of notes of Pontefract cake, sweet licorice, almost sort of a raisined richness that I think shows, unsurprisingly, that there's quite a lot more to open in this fruit. The length that the wine is being given by its mouth-watering nature is excellent. The finish is long, it's lean, got a little bit of drying, spicy grip there, but the fruit isn't fading, it is holding there. And now it's showing me an almost sort of dried cranberry sort of note. There's an awful lot going on here. The interaction of acidity and tannins is excellent, and the palate structure is very fine. At the moment, I have to admit, this wine's very closed, and I suspect, given its concentration, that it will take time to come round. I would think this needs at least 10 years in bottle before it's starting to drink. However, the beautiful, elegant, concentrated and complex nose really does promise that this is a wine that could be exceptional in the future. We do have a Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this wine. I have to admit, it's an aggregation of 1. It came from the critic Jane Anson, and she has rated the wine from a barrel tasting as 96 out of 100. And I certainly don't have any hesitation on saying that I think that that score is fully justified by what I'm tasting here. In fact, I almost wonder if with time it might exceed that score, such as its concentration and poise. This is an effortlessly impressive wine, and I'm very much enjoying tasting it. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button for us, that would be great. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, do sign up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you can set yourself an alert and you can be notified every time we publish a new tasting. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on to them. That would be a great endorsement from you. We'd really appreciate that. If you have any feedback for us, please pop your comments in the box below. We'd be really interested to hear what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. I'll leave a link below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so that you can follow that up and you can find out where it's available and at what price it is. And you can use the tabs on that page to give you a whole host of background information about this wine. So thank you once again for watching, and I do hope you'll make some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.